Overthinkers of Reddit, what unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you are an overthinker? I always keep an unopened deck of cards in my backpack. You never can tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost and he didn't have all of his materials. He had the PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate this statistical principle he was describing, only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila! I was able to produce a shrink-wrap deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me, so that's nice too. Specifically an unopened deck? Like, if you get stuck waiting and play a game to pass the time, you just bin the cards when finished and buy a new deck. Nah. I add the cards to my collection at home. I usually keep an open deck on me as well. But just in case, I have an unopened deck. But once they're getting worn and aren't so easily shuffled, I either pass them off to kids to play with, or if it's warranted, toss the deck. Anytime I do wind up opening my sealed deck, I replace it with another. I buy them in the larger box of bicycle decks you can often find at Costco or Whatnot. So the sealed deck gets replaced, the deck I just opened becomes my new open deck, and my previously open deck is rotated to my home collection. You'd think, from this description, that I play a lot of cards. I actually don't, and especially not this last year, obviously. Though my 6-year-old is becoming a pretty darn good gin, cribbage, blackjack, or poker player. Wow. I honestly don't think I've ever worn out a deck of cards, and I'm still not sure why you need the unopened one. For example, I wouldn't trust it any more than a used one. A scammer could easily shrink-wrap a rigged deck, but I'm glad you get enjoyment out of playing with your kid. We used to play a lot of cards with my parents too. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old's finger at a park. Completely cut off the circulation. Also, the other kid's mom was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. Aw crap, I forgot to pack my nurse. They fit better in the trunk than they do the dash. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do things with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful lol. Have the exact same fear and have been working on training my left hand occasionally. I'm also trying to learn to echolocate in case I go blind. The death of a family member. OCD. When overthinking turns into repeatedly mourning for family who are still alive, because how would I feel if I never get to see them again? This is actually a concept that dates back to Stoicism called negative visualization. I'm not OCD, but I totally do the repeated mourning for family members, friends, boyfriends, pets. I'm hella emotionally prepped. In college on occasion upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen towels from the shower stalls and then lock their room doors, so they had to go to the RA bar asked. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop ceiling tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my ceiling stash. Something similar happened to me at my sorority house. But I just showered for a really long time till they got tired of waiting. I sang and sang and sang. They were my friends and they knew I didn't mind being naked. Okay, I'll just use up all the hot water then. The ceiling stash is genuinely an underappreciated spot. You wouldn't believe how many times we used it in school, and as an adult I've used it to buy and sell small amounts of butt at my their work more than once. It was a godsend in the dorms as well, although many no longer had drop ceilings. You must be tall. This never would cross my mind, let alone my field, if vision down here. I am tall, but I also spent most of junior high and high school climbing shit I wasn't supposed to. I can put my palm on an 8 ceiling without raising my heels, but there's still usually a toilet or piece of furniture or something that can be climbed on for easy access. Wow, you just gave me an epiphany. So at my last workplace, branch managers at the store level would come and go with a fair amount of regularity. A legend of a manager who also moved weed was eventually promoted and moved north for his promotion suddenly and quickly, as was the company's process. After he left, the manager's office would frequently and suddenly smell like weed. I smoke, and the manager who replaced him smokes, so it was not a touchy subject between us. Often when I would be in his location we would sit down and be talking only to catch a strong whiff, and we'd both be like, you smell that? So we'd look for an offending employee, two at least, tell them to smarten up about it, but the smell was always confined to the office. One day we decided we would find the weed. We searched all of the furniture, underneath the drawers, in binders, you name it. We tore that office apart. We never did find the weed, but now I know where it must have been. Edit, and yes, standard push to lift ceiling panels. Came for the validation, did not disappoint. Will forever bring way too much stuff everywhere just in case. I have always done this since I was a kid and would often have comments made like, are you sure you're just packing for a weekend? But then no one is complaining when they need something and you're the only one who thought to bring it. I'm so glad someone said it, BC, it's what all of us low-key hoarders were thinking.